Hey there, and welcome back to another Stranger Things 5 video. And today we're going to continue to desperately try to catch up with all the stuff I missed out on when I was sick. Next up we have episode 2, The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler, which follows up from that insane cliffhanger ending where the Demogorgon rips a hole in reality right inside Holly Wheeler's room and roars at her. When I first watched through the show, the ending of episode 1 had me massively hyped up, and so it played right into the desire of Netflix to get you to binge watch the hell out of it all at once. We pick up from where we left off with the beast roaring at her and Holly screaming, whilst meanwhile Karen's drinking wine and setting up a bath whilst listening to ABBA, and Ted is hitting golf balls in the backyard. I do wonder what the end game is for him there though, you know? Is he gonna go and get his golf balls back the next day, or does he have to buy more in the end? Feels like a particularly wasteful hobby if you ask me, but sure. Also, I get why he doesn't notice anything at first seeing as he's outside, but Karen's like a room away, and she ain't hearing the roars and screams and her daughter getting launched into a bookshelf. Perhaps she needs to lay off the wine. The action sequence itself where Holly's trying to escape from the Demogorgon's pretty awesome and really exciting, although I will say you probably have to suspend your disbelief a little bit for it to work. I mean, we saw this exact Demogorgon rip those soldiers to shreds like it was nothing. It is ludicrously fast and strong. Yet she does manage to escape it somewhat. She goes for the door and it picks her up and throws her at the bookshelf hard. She should probably be unconscious after that, right? I mean, how old is this kid meant to be? Maybe 9? Here she goes full Captain America though. She's all good after getting launched into a wall, and then is strong enough to somehow keep a tight grip on her bed whilst the Demogorgon's trying to drag her through the portal. I know that Flower Boy over here is doing this one-handed, but at the same time, he should not be struggling. I mean, he's pulling so hard her shoe comes off, which gives her a chance to escape. If he was gripping and pulling that hard, how the hell did her grip outlast the shoe? I'm not trying to be overly critical though, because in the end, it was needed for some of the more awesome parts of the episode/sequence, and that part in the room was so intense and cool. A really great follow-up to the ending of the crawl. Holly runs out of the room and then into her mum's bedroom and then bathroom screaming, and Karen tries to calm her down and tell her it's all a nightmare. I love this scene because it's equally parts nail-biting waiting for the Demogorgon to kick down the door, and also frustrating because you're yelling at the screen telling her to believe her kid and do something, anything. Because it's not like this thing's gonna be scared of a wine mum in her nightgown. Then you have that feeling of dread and fear when Karen sees the blood on Holly's head and realizes that it isn't all just a bunch of bullshit, but that there is a monster and it's kicking down the door. Plus, Ted outside sees the lights flickering and is clearly going to go investigate, whilst Mike and Nancy are both separately and desperately trying to make it home in time. I think for me personally, I was expecting at least one of the parents to be killed here, and so this was all just pure stress for me, but in a good way, you know? My blood pressure was through the roof and I was so invested, and I think it makes it so good that you already know the title is The Vanishing ahead of time, so when it hones in on Holly at the end of the crawl, you know it's going to be The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler, and she will be taken. You know ahead of time they're not going to get there in time to stop it, and then Holly gets snatched, but you don't know about the parents. They're largely minor characters outside the bounds of the main group, and so they don't have the same level of plot armor. With the main characters, you know they won't get killed off in episode 2, but with characters like Karen or Ted, they are 100% in the firing line because they could die, and it would serve the plot and the arcs of both Nancy and Mike in their determination to stop Vecna. This section in the bathroom, I knew Karen would survive. I was 100% waiting for Ted to appear and get mauled, which is exactly what happens. Props to Ted here though. He sees something weird going on and he goes inside to find his house trashed and marches in with his golf club. We know he has no chance, and I think because we know that, it makes him seem all the more brave for this. Then he's confronted by the Demogorgon and hell yeah! He lands a swing on it and he tries again, but it swats the club away, and then it swats him away. Ouch. I kind of thought he was dead from this, to be honest. He's slashed across the chest and is launched through a wall and then through Mike's closet door and onto the other side of his bed. I know he survives and is in hospital, but I do feel that in normal non-TV circumstances, you wouldn't survive a hit like this, right? Through a wall, through a closet, and crashing onto the floor. Not to mention the claws through the chest and the blunt force trauma from being hit so hard that it sends you flying. Oh well, I shall suspend my disbelief. Karen and Holly make a run for it, and Karen trips because she's soaking wet from the bath and is barefoot on tiles. This slows them down enough for the monster to catch up, and so she grabs her wine bottle, smashes it on the counter, and she squares up. This is so epic, and I just love these sorts of mama bear sequences in media. It always hits like crack for me, but it also fills me with dread because it's a scene that feels tailor-made as a heroic last stand. She's one woman against the Demogorgon. You know the title, and that bottle ain't gonna do shit. Plus, we saw what happened to Ted with one swing, so you just know there's no hope, but then the scene cuts away to Nancy and Al closing in on the house, and I will admit, I was expecting Karen would be dead by this point because there's more drama to be had in them arriving too late and seeing the destruction than there is arriving to see Karen get swatted and Holly dragged away. I did like we got to see that slow-mo of Karen getting obliterated, and to be honest, I really do think she should have been killed by these blows, and I think narratively, she should have died here. I know they later want to use her for the Mr. Watson reveal to Mike and Nancy, but come on, look at the hit she's taking. No normal first aid's gonna save you there, surely, and it's not like an ambulance is a second away. For me, this one's ridiculous that she survived simply because how brutal they made the wounds. Her dying in the hospital would have made just as much sense, and to be honest, How hard would it be to have them figure out Vecna was taking Holly for a purpose some other way? Let's not forget they still have the Will stuff that helps them in that regard. Oh well. We move on to the hospital, and this scene is just pure sadness, and whilst the parents didn't and don't die, it still gets across the exact type of vibe the Duffers were clearly going for. That feeling of defeat out of nowhere and the hopelessness that comes along with it. They were hunting for Vecna for so long, only for him to strike back and brutalize their parents and steal their sister for who knows what purpose. The scene with Nancy washing her hands and sobbing in the bathroom was just bleak and tragic, and then the scene of the reception where she vents at Mike and claims that the two of them were to blame for not telling their parents the truth is so heavy as well. Really top tier acting for Nancy here. I really like that they had this scene for them to crumble and have a bit of a breakdown, but they also don't let the plot linger and wallow in it either. They have Lucas there to somewhat act as a voice of reason of this not being their fault. Whilst Nancy thinks this is simply a punishment from Vecna, he thinks it isn't, because otherwise, why would her parents still be alive? And why would it have taken Holly when it could have just killed her too? He thinks there's something bigger going on, much like what happened with Will back in season 1. Yeah, the pacing here was really great, as we got to see that grief process, and no doubt it will crop up again during the season, but it doesn't consume their arcs for the whole episode, and it lets the story springboard into something new. From here, we have our latest appearance from the military plotline, but this time focusing on the dude who's hunting Al. He turns up at the Wheeler place and gets the rundown from his goons, and he sees that there are 2 bloody jackets and thinks, oh, 11 might have been here. And that's fine, it makes him seem rather clever. I just don't like the next line. He wants CCTV of everywhere within a 2-mile radius of the house, but isn't this just a residential area? How many houses are going to have significant CCTV that's able to capture Al riding along in Nancy's car in high definition? Maybe if it was a more public space, but small town Indiana? I don't know. Even if they did get it, how the hell are they going to figure out it's Al? It would surely be fairly grainy. Maybe I'm underestimating the technology level of 1987, but I just found this pretty goofy. We move on to Al in the Upside Down, which I was excited for, but at the same time I knew there was no chance she was actually going to be encountering Holly. It would be pretty silly to have her save her right away after all. You have to build that type of thing up, and it would be hardly the vanishing of Holly Wheeler if she was instantly found. That being said, it's also very convenient that Hopper and Al meet up this quickly. Wasn't he out in the middle of nowhere? So of all the areas in Upside Down Hawkins, he managed to find his way into the Wheeler neighborhood, because it's not like she's gone very far yet. We just saw her on the road after all. It's just a little bit silly. I have to say that this scene where she blasts him and then just talks to him as he tries to get his bearings and figure out why she's there and what she's talking about with Karen and her wine and why Holly Wheeler's in the Upside Down was very funny. That's the thing about this show. It can be so bleak and dark and heavy, and then you can have a scene like this that's dealing with those really heavy topics still, and yet it makes you laugh and lighten things up a lot, which is really good, and it's probably what the show and the audience needs from time to time. When everything's always brutal and grim, it does become a bit grueling and overly heavy. Stuff like this prevents that. At the radio station, we then get some Will content. Robin's awkward as hell, and Joyce sort of shoos her way out of the room so she can talk to Will. He talks about how he was the Demogorgon in that moment. He could see what it was seeing and thinking about what it was thinking, which is insane. I wonder what the thought process of a Demogorgon would even be. He talked about how he can't really remember why I would go after Holly and what its purpose was, but that he thinks he's permanently tapped into the hive mind. When he left Hawkins, it went away and he was fine, but now he's back. It feels like it did before. Once again, just some really good acting on display here. Noah Schnapp's been really good across the entirety of the show's run, really, and he only gets better and better with this season. I love that in 5 you get a much wider range of Will's moments and portrayals. We've been getting the traumatized victim version of him, we've seen him joking around with his friends and being a forward thinker and strategist now when it comes to trying to find Holly, and it's awesome. I tell you what though, this scene does make me want to punt Joyce into the sky. What the actual hell? So this family has hosted her for over a year, and she seems rather ungrateful and unhelpful, and then after they've been maimed and put into hospital, she's unwilling to trust her son when he thinks he could help find Holly. She's willing to let poor little Holly be stuck out there in the Upside Down for who knows how long, with her plan being to fix the radio so they can call Hopper and check in with him. Yeah, she claims that this is what she thinks is the best idea for them being able to save Holly, but realistically, she's actually thinking it's the safest thing for Will. I understand she's a concerned parent, but good God, he's 16 and believes he can do it, and instead of trusting him, she shoots him down and damages his confidence again, whilst also seemingly not having too much care about poor Holly. I mean, she's lived with this little girl for over a year, and it's like she's talking about somebody's lost dog. Meanwhile, Will's raging and desperate because he cares about this girl, and he knows what she's likely going through. These damn adults. This season really does feel like a changing of the guard in that way, doesn't it? You have the younger ones being the ones to lead the charge now and have the right idea and the best plans, and it's a really great development, but it's still frustrating to watch at first. Still though, it was a really great scene that's then dampened by the fact that next up I have to watch a Steve and Jonathan sequence. Don't get me wrong, I love the characters, and at first the scene's great because you have this awkward moment where Steve's trying to charge the battery of the van with the help of some random person that's pulled over and who is clearly frustrated with him and doesn't want to be there. So I wonder why she even stopped to begin with. It's deliciously awkward, but then he gets back back in to talk to Jonathan, and the two of them begin to speak about what happened to Nancy's parents. Steve wants to go and see her to make sure she's alright and give her flowers, but Jonathan wants to stick to the plan and try to find Hopper, and thus Eleven, and thus Holly. This leads to an argument, and holy shit, I just don't care, man. Why? Why must we have this storyline at all? Also, does Steve just seem like such a loser here to anyone else? Why the hell would she want flowers? Can you imagine how angry she'd be if he turned up to give her flowers when she's thinking they're out trying to save Holly? Especially since she clearly spoke to Jonathan on the phone to tell him what's going on, and probably told Jonathan she wants him to help find her little sister. I almost wish Steve did go to the hospital, because it would certainly lead to him being shut down for good. Look how they massacred my boy. However, the scene does reintroduce Dustin to the story after he's beat down by the jocks during the crawl, so there's that, I suppose. We then go to another frustrating scene that was just, these damn adults need to get it together. Hopper's asking Al how she got to the Wheeler house, and she says that Nancy drove her, which starts to get him angry because they're not supposed to drive. He thinks it's not safe. He complains the whole scene about how her theory about the Demogorgon sucks, and that she's acting on impulse and emotion instead of using logic and reason. He yells and talks over her and she hardly gets a word in, but I do like this scene even though it pissed me off, because I think it's supposed to piss you off, because you can see she is using logic and reason and instinct too. He though is the hypocrite who is acting entirely on emotion. He's trying to keep her safe beyond the bounds of reason. So yeah, whilst these scenes with Joyce and Hopper are anger inducing, they do serve a purpose to showcase that yes, the adults are not thinking clearly and are acting selfish in their desire to utterly protect their children, who could play a crucial role in this fight, no matter what the cost is, even if the life of a little girl's hanging in the balance. Contrast that to the frustration from the scene with Steve and Jonathan, which is more annoyance at the writing in general, rather than the actual characters in the show. The Hopper and Joyce stuff seems intentional to get you to side with the kids, and have them have big breakout hero moments where they spread their wings and prove they know what they're doing. The other stuff, though, just feels like a bad storyline. The frustration then bleeds away with such a sad little scene. Here we have Lucas telling Max about everything that's going on, and that he isn't sure that Al can defeat Vecna alone. That she's gonna need the strength of the full party to be able to do it. He then breaks down begging Max to wake up. Tremendous acting, and a scene that, knowing what I do now, definitely heralds Max making a return to help Holly later on in this first volume. I really think that the writing of this season has stepped up another level, and here we're on track for having one hell of a finale. I mean, yes, it's still early days, and the second volume's still to come, and then the finale, but still, it's all great signs so far the final season can live up to expectations and be a truly memorable, epic, and satisfying finish to the story. From here, we move over to Mike and Nancy again, and I'll be honest, whilst I'm glad that Mike and Nancy are getting to have some time together to unravel some mystery, at the same time, the way this scene starts off is so dumb. Mike is getting some disgusting looking coffee from a machine, and he walks over to sit with Nancy in the waiting room. Along the way, he briefly glances into a child room, and somehow, he's able to notice a wrinkle in time. This would normally be fine, but it's just the angle he glances at and the distance the book is away from the window and everything. It makes it seem so goofy and unrealistic. I think it would have made more sense for him to be sitting in the waiting room and glazed over while Nancy's talking to the receptionist. He then goes on to notice, amongst the reading materials waiting rooms usually have, maybe the title of the book, which then kicks in the creepy Mr. Watson music and starts off the scene properly. Nancy comes over to him and starts talking about how they still don't have a timeline for their parents or a doctor they can talk to, but she notices he isn't listening, and he goes into his theory. His theory is that Mr. Watson's real. Holly had told Mike that Mr. Watson told her monsters were going to try to get her on the same day she was actually taken. Like Lucas said, he isn't sure he believes in coincidences like that. However, Nancy remains skeptical. What I did like about this though is that even though it's pretty obvious to the audience that Mr. Watson is Vecna, it isn't actually clear to the characters, but it doesn't make them seem stupid. Lots of kids do have imaginary friends, so it's not out of the ordinary. They also don't know that Watson only appears in people's minds and not in person, so it's not clearly Vecna using his powers, and at the same time, he's warning the kids about the monsters. Why would Vecna be warning somebody about the monsters that he sends out? Obviously, we know he's trying to get their trust, and he probably has some big goal like he did with Will, but why would they suspect that? At best, it either is coincidence and he's not real, or maybe he's yet another faction that's just appeared before the final battle. It's just nice to have the protagonist working off of incomplete information instead of just hitting them with the idiot stick, you know? However, in order for them to go any further here and figure out what their next steps are, they're going to need to be able to talk to their mum, which is going to be a problem because they're not allowed in. Before we get that though, it's back over to the van storyline where they've picked up Dustin, and yeah, it's basically one big argument. I will say that this storyline is much better than Steve versus Jonathan. Here it's like a protective older brother who's struggling to get his little brother to open up to him, and who is also really struggling with his angsty phase. It's so sad to see them fighting after we've seen their really cute bond grow across seasons 2, 3, and 4. It's very compelling because you know there's going to be some sort of breakdown and resolution here, and they're just cooking up the drama, and you can actually see both sides of it, but honestly mostly Steve's, because I do kind of agree with him here. He constantly looks out for Dustin, only to be ignored again and again, and now they're in deep shit. However, at the same time, I don't think it's fair for him to blame him for everything everything that's gone wrong with the crawl, which I sort of think he is. I love the nuance here and it makes me want to see more. We then finally return to the radio station where Joyce is trying to get in contact with everybody. Meanwhile, Robin's just sitting there seemingly thinking, and then she looks at Will and has an idea. She lies to Joyce that they need to fix the flux capacitor, which is from Back to the Future, and which I guess Robin rightfully assumes Joyce has never seen. It's a two-person job, and so Robin takes Will upstairs and tells him that his mum's plan sucks and that his is great. Pretty much doing everything his mum didn't do and kickstarting one of the best new friendships in the show. She tells him his plan was genius, and so you can see him go from unsure about himself and not wanting to stand up to his mum to being empowered and excited and willing to go against her. So off they go. I really love the odd couple pairs that crop up in this show, and here we see the birth of a new one, and probably one of the best ones that's been done since the original Steve and Dustin. Hell, this season's already had a lot of fun little pairs already, but this one is something special. We briefly cut to the Doctor in the Upside Down so that we can have the confirmation that they know Al's in the Upside Down to up the tension for the next scene with Hopper and Al. They're still on the trail, but Al notices Hopper's struggling, and whilst he tries to claim that it's a cramp, she forces him to reveal he has a superficial bullet wound from when the Demogorgon attacked the convoy. Here we get to the root of his overprotectiveness with Al. He tries to mask it on the idea that Al isn't thinking, and is trying to be brave and could get herself killed like his friends in the Vietnam War, but in the end, it all comes down to Sarah and how he can't bear to bury another daughter. That you can't count on anything in this life, and thus, he needs Al to listen to him, and that wherever the blood leads, she needs to do what he says. Look, I thought this was a really cute scene when he opens up to Al and tells her why he's acting this way, but I didn't really like that it felt like it was presented as him being correct here, and then insisting that she listen to him from now on, even though it feels like the parents are not cooking up very good plans at all. So I am a little bit mixed on some of the stuff in this scene, not gonna lie, but the emotion carries the scene quite well, so it didn't bother me too much. They hear some noises and then off they go, before we cut over to the next scene back at the hospital. This scene's really just here to piss you off as well. The doctor that's handling the Wheeler case comes out after Mike works his cutesy charm on the receptionist off screen, and essentially just talks down to Nancy because clearly she's just a young woman. He even shushes her. It just makes you want to climb through the screen, doesn't it? He calls her sweetheart and walks off. It seems to have acquired another target for when the hospital gets attacked in the trailers, haven't we? Is it a bit harsh to wish this dude death? Yes, very. But I also think it's why they have him act this way. To make the audience dislike him so it's very cathartic when he's mauled by the demodogs. I guess it's also here to give us the fun setup for Nancy dressing as a nurse and Mike dressing as a patient to infiltrate their mum's room to talk to her. So it's a scene that serves to build to a punchline. We move back to the van storyline again where it seems that they briefly almost get a signal, only for it to be a false alarm. A bit of levity is then added into the mix when Joyce is on the walkie-talkie asking about the flux capacitor that Will and Robin are supposedly working on. This in turn gets Jonathan, Steve and Dustin all confused as hell. And man, this scene was just funny. And once again, it was much needed levity in what has been a very dark episode filled with lots of heavy shit and emotional conversations. Sometimes, you just need a good moment to point and laugh at the characters. This then leads us to Will and Robin, who arrive at the place where Will had his first vision. It's dark and it's spooky, and Robin says they can turn back if he wants to, and yeah, I would also be having doubts because this is 100% the kind of place where people are going to be brutally murdered by serial killers or random monsters. Will's response though is very funny and is probably one of my favourite lines of the episode. I'm more afraid of my mum at this point. Just some quality dialogue with some great delivery. They head over to the place where he has the vision and he feels nothing, and he moves on whilst explaining to Robin that if her theory is correct, he has to get close to the Demogorgon in order to be able to tap into the hive mind and see what he's seeing. Thus, he thinks that maybe when he got his first vision, it was because the Demogorgon was passing by his location. So perhaps the area where it makes its lair is nearby, which I guess is as good a theory as any. We have a very awkward conversation here when they're walking, where Robin's telling him about how she knows that he saw her and Vicky at the hospital, but she wants him to not tell anybody because other people wouldn't be able to understand. This is just the next piece in that cascade of scenes that leads Will to his sorcerer mode, which at the time just felt like a regular old scene. But now looking back, you can see how it all fits together and how impressively made it all is. Robin then gets distracted and starts talking about making a mandala in class when she was younger, which in turn triggers a memory in Will. He remembers that when the sky was spinning, there was laughter. And off he goes. Here we finally come to a string of scenes that start to give us some answers about what the hell is going on. And it really does come right in the nick of time. For quite a while in this episode, it felt as if we've been setting up a whole heap of mysteries and asking a lot of questions without any answers. That can eventually get old, so now we get an idea of where the story is going to be going next. Hopper and Al continue along their path until they reach a giant fleshy wall, near which is one of Holly's shoes. So this is it, Vecna's lair, so to speak. Beyond this wall is likely where he's been hiding and biding his time to build up his strength again before he launches his all-out assault. I tell you what, this is going to be one of the most horrific things we've seen in the show so far. Full eldritch horror, and it's just perfect. It fills you with a sense of doom and foreboding and disgust, and it was a great creative choice. The shot where it keeps zooming out and there's still just nothing but wall wherever you look is so awesome, and really serves as a nice early showcase of how powerful Vecna's become. So now we know where Holly's been taken, we can learn about Mr. Watson and have that final confirmation for us, even if it was rather obvious. Once again, we get brought back down from the horror and the hype to Mike and Nancy in disguise and making their way towards their mum's room. I love the part where they see the doctor that dismissed them earlier, and so Nancy tells Mike to limp, and he does the strangest limp ever, and then defends himself when Nancy makes fun of him. It's great to see these sibling vibes again again that they sometimes touch on every so often across the seasons, but are never consistent with. So they sneak in and they wake up their mum, and man, this scene is so sad and tough to watch. It's crazy how the show's able to be such an emotional roller coaster, going from highs to lows so quickly, and yet it just works. It never feels jarring in that way. They ask their mum to write and tell her that Holly's missing, and so they need to know about Mr. Watson. She tells them though that the teacher saw Holly talking and nobody was there, but Holly did say that his name was Henry. Of course, as this is all going on, we have Will figure out that he was seeing through the eyes of Vecna, and thus through the eyes of Holly, whilst we also have the reveal that Holly's with Vecna in an idealized version of his childhood home. The thing is though, that even though it was clearly Vecna all along, the reveal of him is still so well done. Them all piecing it together at once as you see him with Holly and then his creepy voice. My god, it's so freaky, man. Then when he closes the door and you see his face shift from kind to deranged serial killer, hell yeah, that is how you do a reveal. Even though I already knew, it had me on the edge of my seat then, and it still does now. It's just so well put together. This season has been insane so far. I think I'd forgotten how much I loved it. The episode at times was frustrating for me, but the good far outweighs the bad, and that ending was next level, and 100% makes you keen to see the next episode pronto, which is what I'm going to do now, honestly. So with all that being said, these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler? Did you like it? Hate it? Somewhere in between? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.